You found the skeleton. How would you tell it's a dinosaur? You personally, how would you decide?
Well, interesting question. I don't know. I'd have to do some research on that.
Hey everybody, welcome to Dapper Reacts number 37, that's what it is. I'm here, as typical, with Vishanti, who is currently riding some kind of sauropod through a fern tree, I guess? Is that what's going on?
Yeah, I'm I'm hanging out with the sauropod,
Okay.
and much in the style of Jurassic Park, it's chewing on some leaves,
Is it going to sneeze on you?
nomming. I'm gonna stand behind it, as you can see. I'm waving
Okay.
because I'm saying, "Hey, look, it's not gonna sneeze snot all over me."
Okay.
And apparently, there's a really cool slideshow playing behind us.
Yes, there is. That's the transitional species slideshow, and then over to the right is the feathered dinosaur fossils slideshow, which actually it does not contain every known feathered dinosaur fossil that have been found. Just the ones that had good pictures that I could easily find on the internet. So that's always cool.
Cool.
So we are here to talk about Pete Greer, and I know that some people aren't familiar with this guy. I've only covered him once, I think, although it was a little series of videos. But Pete Greer is a young Earth creationist pastor who likes to give little talks, sermons, and seminars about young Earth creationism. And one of the reasons that there's two big reasons I look at him. One is he's not that far from me, right? His church is over in Payson, Arizona, which is over in the eastern section of the state, a little bit north of like the center line, if I remember correctly. I've been there. It's a fine place, you know. But yeah, it's a little bit near me, so that's interesting. And also, I like to take a look at what are the people who are sitting in the pews of churches who accept young Earth creation, like creationist churches, right? What are the people in those pews getting taught? Because they're not getting taught like Jeffrey Tompkins' mathematics about percent similarity in alignable regions between pan troglodytes and Homo sapiens, right? And so those are interesting things, right? And it's important to address the more technical scientific claims of young Earth creationism. But on the other hand, clearly, if you're just going to go have a cup of coffee with your creationist coworker and creationism comes up, like that coworker isn't going to be talking to you about like whether gapped or ungapped alignment in, blast is a good idea, or whether or not the Green River Formation can reasonably be assumed to be, post-flood or mid-flood or whatever. Like, that's not what's going to be happening. And so that's why I like to sometimes look at just what is just some regular pastor talking about when it comes to young Earth creationism. So I found this video. Unfortunately, the quality of the video is pretty low, but Pete Greer's talk was reasonably interesting when I skimmed through it. So we're going to see how it goes. I do have to warn you, the beginning of the audio is especially rough, but I did clean up the audio for the most part. It's better than it was. It's still bad, and at the very beginning, it's very bad. I've also done a little bit of color correction, because for some reason, I don't know what it is. It happens with him. It's happened with a few other people, most notably Charles Jackson. But there just seems to be something about people filming young Earth creationists where they just put, like, the Hollywood, this scene takes place in Mexico filter over the entire video. And I don't know why.
Robert Rodriguez filter.
Yeah, the Robert Rodriguez filter. Yeah. Or sometimes I'll call it just the piss filter. Because it looks like everything was filmed through a thin layer of urine.
I mean, don't you know that Mexico is just naturally sepia toned?
Yeah, of course it is. That's how it works. Well, so is India, of course. And the Middle East. And Africa. Yep. Any place where people think that it's hot and relatively not wealthy, it's sepia toned. That's just how it is.
Yeah.
Which is actually one of the reasons why I appreciate the movie Tremors 2. Because that movie is almost entirely set in Mexico. It's not set in the desert, and it doesn't have a stupid sepia filter over it.
Right.
So I appreciate that, because they're like, yeah, this is also Mexico. Rolling hills full of green grass is also Mexico. Mexico isn't just a desert that is, like, Sonora. Like, Mexico is more than...
is.
Yeah. Mexico isn't just, like, Baja California, Chihuahua, and Sonora. Turns out.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, there's the whole belt from like Jalisco to like Guanajuato to the coast, like Veracruz, where there's a crap load of mountains and there's lots of like lush, greenery, and then you get to Yucatan where it's like jungles. It's just nobody ever does that. Like,
no one sets movies there. I guess technically, Apocalypto was set there.
Well, the Ruins was set there vaguely.
Oh yeah, that's true too. The Ruins was I like the Ruins. The Ruins is good. Anyway, but we're not here to talk about horror movies set in Mexico. We're here to talk about Pete Greer. So first, we are activating the drinking rules. As you can see, there's a drink counter up there. I can increase it. I can decrease it. So we'll go through the drinking rules real quick. Of course, if Pete Greer says something that's just so stupid, I have to give my brain a little bit of a break. Take a drink. If he gets something right, and he's not just quoting someone, we'll take a drink for that. If he tells a joke that doesn't land, or a story that didn't happen, we'll take a drink. So for instance, if he, say, confuses a conversation he had with a shampoo bottle with an argument he had with a hypothetical professor from Berkeley on a hypothetical airplane to nowhere, we take a drink. Also, if it's not clear where he's going to be going with his next argument, but either Vishanti or I, or both, can guess, and we're right, we'll take a drink for correct prediction. We'll also take a drink if he cites a source, and the source not only fails to support him, but directly contradicts. So.
Also, I would like to submit ad hominid when they only can critique Lucy. It's really the only one that they know. Like,
okay,
they bring up
but we can only use
fossils. But yeah, it's more like a one-time thing. Kind of like on the bingo card, you have the mega stupid and it takes 2 keys to launch.
Right, yeah. So if they do that at some point in the video, I think we can take a drink for ad hominid. But like, if they keep doing it, I'm not going to take a drink every time they mix up Lucy with every other hominid. So we can do that. JT, who's been a member for 9 months, has just demonstrated another one of the drink triggers. And it is keep up the great work, Dapper, with a Godzilla and an AIG as a bag of dicks emoji. So we're going to take a drink for that, because that's 2 of the triggers you guys can cause. So if you send a super chat or a membership milestone chat, and it contains either AIG as a bag of dicks or Godzilla, those can be, the AIG in the bag is a bag of dicks can be either in the emoji form, or you can do it in the form of actually typing out a phrase that means that, but you have to be a little bit careful because YouTube will censor it if you just type it out that way. We'll take a drink. Now, to get the Godzilla emoji, you do have to be a channel member. Feel free to do that if that's something you want to do. We will also take a drink if the creationist here, Pete Greer, mentions the National Socialist German Workers' Party, various leadership members of that party, or various of their historically significant activities, especially in the first half of the 20th century. So, if you don't know what the NSDAP is, feel free to Google it, and then find yourself on a watch list. That'll be fun.
We'll just look up Godwin's Law.
Or look up Godwin's Law. That might actually not get you
safer version.
Yeah, that might not get you on a watch list. The missing links between Ken Ham's synapses, aka B2022, for £2 says Godzilla, Mothra, Ghidorah, AIG's a bag of dicks, and Tunicate. So we'll take a drink. Now, okay. And last but certainly not least, if we do get gifted memberships, so near where there's the same button that lets you do a super chat, there's also a gift memberships option. If you gift those, we will take a drink for each gifted membership. Because I really like the idea that, as many people as possible can do things like have access to the emojis and milestone chats and all that stuff. So, as both a thank you, and a, I guess an incentive, that's why we would take a drink for that. Now, if you can gift large numbers, if you gift like 30 or more, we're just going to finish the drink, add that number to the count, and get a new drink. I'm not going to sit here and count out 30 drinks. The South Geek 2 Pelagic Boogaloo official says, for €5, just got back from a day trip to Vienna. So glad Dapper is streaming tonight. Vishanti makes everything better. Hit like, everybody. Yes, please do hit like. All right. Do we have anything else?
I am furiously seam ripping and patterning for a costume that I need to have finished no later than Tuesday night. Because then I leave for a convention, and I will... Woo!
Yeah.
Con crunch is real.
It is. It always is. Every time.
Yeah, and like, I know that I'm bad about waiting till the last minute, but even this is a bit much for me because usually I have started a costume a week before I go, but because my kitchen and dining room was being remodeled and literally they had to rip out the walls and cabinets, I was not able to even go in that part of my house. And the dining room area is like part of where we turned into our crafting space. So yeah, I've been in panic mode.
Vandali 1998 for $5 says, Vishanti, aren't you afraid Dapper will eat your new sauropod friend?
No, I'm not afraid of that.
Yeah, I can, I can contain myself. I don't have to eat every sauropod.
Yeah, I feel like he's got... I mean, plus you probably already had breakfast this morning. You're full.
I did have breakfast. I did. All right, let's get some Pete Greer in here. That's the whole point. Isn't Dapper a confirmed vegan? No, I am not, in fact, a vegan.
No, he is not a vegan.
Yep.
I can personally attest to the fact that he eats at least birria tacos.
Yep.
So, which are delicious.
I eat other kinds of tacos too.
Yeah.
All right.
I haven't seen you eat other types of tacos though.
You see me eat meat on pizza.
Indeed.
Did we get burgers or something at some point?
Oh yeah. There's at Bob's Burgers actually.
Yeah, there you go. All right. Here we go. This doesn't have sound, and the sound when it starts in again is going to be pretty rough. I'm sorry. It's just how it is.
This presentation
creationist and good quality video.
To show people
they never have good quality.
A different way of looking at the geologic layer, basically.
Like I said, this is really bad, but it does clear up. I don't know if someone fiddled with controls or something on whatever they were recording with, but yeah.
Sounds like they're recording with a phone.
We've been taught that the geologic layers took millions of years to be laid down and to form. And that, therefore, the fossils that are in them are millions of years old. But is there another way of looking at it? And there is. It's called the biblical view.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope to show tonight that when you're a Christian and you hold to a literal reading of Genesis,
which you really shouldn't do, right?
Yeah, you shouldn't.
Look, I'm going to point it out again, right? If you actually took Genesis literally, you would have to be a flat earther who believes that there's a cosmic ocean above the flat earth that God opens doors in the dome above the flat earth to let floodwaters in. Yeah, doors and windows.
Yeah.
And that's how the rain gets in.
Yeah.
Don't be a literal Genesis reader. At least not, and then believe in Genesis, right? I guess if you want to read Genesis literally, and then also just not believe it, I mean, whatever, fine. But like, if you're going to be someone who's going to be a Christian and I believe in Genesis and as some kind of, spiritual truth or whatever, don't read literally. And the thing is, Pete Greer doesn't read literally. He's not a flat earther. He doesn't believe there's a crystal dome in the sky. But also, the missing links between Ken Ham Synapses, aka B2022, has just gifted 5 Dapper Dinosaur memberships. They went to Jillian Wren, Need Be, Mary Ann the Night Owl, Tyler West, and Tom Boogan. And if I pronounce any of those wrong, please let me know. And yes, do send the tetrapod.
Pelagic
and no, the missing... Look, I'm going to say B2022 has it right. Sessile tunicates. Here we go. Take 5 drinks.
Pelagic.
No, pelagic are the worst.
Pelagic while he's drinking. Ha ha. Send pelagic tunicates.
Well, I just did 5 for that, but Savage quotes from random note cards. You guys. Oh, you guys have the best names. Just gifted 5 more memberships. They went to A Coyote, Colin Dietrich, Damian McLagan, Jason Hyatt, and Robert Saylor. Thank you very much, everybody. Here goes 5 more. 1.
And while he's counting that, post a few pelagic tunicates for your girl Vishanti.
4.
Because unlike Dapper, I don't discriminate. I recognize the validity of all tunicates.
You probably even like mosquitoes, don't you?
I don't like them, but I don't have to like them.
All right. Here we go.
And take the biblical view that you're not shutting off your brain. You're just looking at the evidence, the same evidence that everybody has from a little bit different
you are
point of
shutting
view.
off your brain.
Yeah, that's the problem. Like, I was actually just listening to two other creationist videos that people have sent me, because people like to torture me, right? I don't do it enough to myself. And in both cases, there was someone talking about how they ended up being a young Earth creationist, because in both cases, they weren't always young Earth creationists. And the interesting thing is, it's never the evidence, right? No one starts out as just like not a Christian, not interested in Christianity or whatever, then looks around and says, gee, you know, it really seems like evolution is nonsense. The Earth is only 6,000 years old, that there was a global flood 4,400 years ago. All this really checks out. And then lo and behold, it's like, oh, wait, there were Christians teaching this all along? Well, I guess now I'm a Christian. Right? No one's doing that. What is actually happening is people become Christians for various reasons. Like, I was raised as a Christian. I became a Christian because, I mean, even in some cases, because they were convinced of the truth of the idea through, like, someone gave me historical arguments. Whatever, fine.
Or they had a personal experience.
Right. The Lord Jesus Christ appeared in my dream and told me to go join the church. Okay, cool. I don't really care what your reasons for being a Christian are, as long as it's not, like, evil.
Yeah.
So great. Have fun with that. But then they become convinced of a particularly conservative version of Christianity with a particular, I would say, overly literal hermeneutical style. And then they were like,
very selectively literal.
Oh yeah, well there's that too. And then they're like, well, I guess if this is what Christianity teaches, then I guess I should believe it. And then they'd go and find reasons why they can find this little shred of like, well, maybe it's not impossible that evolution is wrong. Maybe. And that's all I need.
To quote, or at least paraphrase, Dan McClellan, they just have to gin up the tiniest sliver of not impossible when it comes to their, like, young Earth creationism.
By the way, Carrie Bronson, who's been a member for 28 months, my goodness, thank you very much.
Hey, cool.
And is at the amnio level, which is the lowest level that you get your name in the credits for. Says, the animated head shook at the perfect moment to tell her no just a moment ago. Nice. I do like it when my animation actually lines up. Because I've actually had people like, are you controlling that? I'm like, no, it's just an animation loop.
No.
It's like, oh, well, it looks really, like, this looks like it's reacting to what you're saying. Yeah, that's just because I'm a contrarian a lot of the time. I'm often disagreeing, so it shakes its head a lot.
That, like, just right there, it just did it on the stream. I like when little dinosaur is adjusting its neck, and then the jaw goes rap.
Yes, I like that too.
Makes me laugh.
A Star You, who's been a member for 5 months and is at the amnio level, says the creationist video must have been filmed by the same camera used to film Nessie with a Kenthoven and a Godzilla. We dream for Godzilla. All right, here we go.
I hope to show everybody tonight. In order to get to why those layers are there, we need to understand what the flood was and how it happened. And so we'll be doing that first. But
by the way, this weird, awkward framing is in fact original. I didn't make this a Dutch angle with him way off frame over in like the last fifth. That wasn't my choice. Just letting you know that the poor camera work is original. Which, if really is at a weird Dutch angle, what is going on?
Yeah, if he uses that TV as like his display for slides and stuff, it's gonna be garbage.
Yeah, he does.
Ugh. Not surprised, but
I guess I could have tried to convert this video so that the TV is square and he's just a tiny little person off in the corner. That's a lot of work.
There's a lot of interesting things on this topic out there, and scientists have said that there was a flood of noetic proportions on Mars.
No one.
What?
No one has ever said this.
What?
I'm taking a drink.
What scientists have said that?
Literally the only people who call themselves scientists that I'm aware of that have said that are the folks at AIG and ICR. And maybe CMI, I'm not sure.
What in the world?
Basically, what happened was when we first got our first really good maps of Mars, people noticed that there was what sure looked an awful lot like flood spillways in the northern hemisphere of Mars. It looked like at some point there had been really, really big floods over the surface of Mars. And it turns out, yeah, that's true. There have been, just like there have been on Earth. But unlike Earth, Mars has I'll say a slower rock cycle, right? Mars doesn't have tectonic plates that are shifting around and subducting and whatnot. So if something happens on Mars, like, 2 billion years ago, you're still probably going to see the effects of that right now. And so, yeah, these floods probably happened several billion years ago, and they were very big. They're bigger than most floods on Earth are, but not all floods. We do have gigantic floods similar to this on Earth. But there's no evidence that there was an entire worldwide flood on Mars, right? It just didn't happen.
Ugh.
And yeah.
And I seriously doubt that any scientist that was describing whatever floods happened on Mars described it as being, quote, of Noachic proportions.
Yes, and of course, as Sir Equinox is pointing out, it is Noachian, and also, hello, my name is Fearmonger, Deaf Not Otangelo has also pointed, yeah, it's Noachian. That's the proper one. Now, here's the thing,
thank you.
Right? People sometimes say of biblical proportions to mean, hugely catastrophic.
Mm-hmm.
But what they don't usually mean is, I think this was a literal miraculous act of God of a scale that defies modern physics.
Yeah.
Which is what Pete Greer is thinking that it means when someone says something like that, right? So,
yeah.
Was there a scientist somewhere who said, oh, I think there was a flood of biblical proportions on Mars? Yeah, probably.
Probably.
Yep.
Did he mean it was a literal worldwide flood? No.
No. Because there's counter evidence to that idea, right? Many of Mars' rocks were definitely not put down by water. Now, many of them were. We do have sedimentary rocks on Mars that we've seen that were laid down in lakes and rivers, which is really cool, by the way.
Hmm?
But yeah, it's not all of Mars. Anyway, here we go.
They've been saying, some scientists have been saying this for years. We keep discovering things that look like there was once liquid water on Mars. Actually,
not that long ago, we discovered things that looks like there might still be some liquid water on Mars, because a few years back, there were a series of hills that were photographed on Mars a few years apart, and in the more recent photo, gullies had formed that looked like runoff. Oh. And so it's not clear, because at the surface of Mars, the air pressure is not high enough to keep liquid water liquid. But if the water is hypersaline, then that might actually be just enough to let it stay liquid for just long enough to do things like erode gullies. So there is some idea that there might occasionally be a tiny bit of surface water that's hypersaline that can exist on Mars. That's still very unconfirmed. We didn't, see the gullies form. We just saw before and after. There was no water obvious in either picture. So it's one of those, like, if it does exist, which is not clear, it's going to be very small amounts and very transitory.
Hey, Dapper,
maybe.
Dapper, if it's like got a high saline content when creationists learn about it, does that mean they're going to be salty about it?
Yes, it does.
I'll be here all week, folks. Actually, I won't be here all week.
It's true, you won't.
I'll be here till Wednesday.
Savage,
try the veal anyway.
Savage quotes from random note cards. Cobra says, AIG is a sack of codpiece covered anatomy. We'll take a drink. Thank you very much. Maybe we should bring back the gigantic cod pieces from the past.
Oh my god.
No? You don't think so?
I mean, I don't get a say in that one way or another. If you guys decide to do that, just... Alright.
Alright, everybody. Giant cod pieces. Get on it.
They think that if we find liquid water on Mars, that proves that life came from Mars.
Again, no one thinks this. Take another drink. Okay, so...
If liquid water, therefore life from Mars, what?
So, Mars definitely had...
Just a few steps in there.
Yeah, Mars definitely had liquid water. We don't currently have any evidence of it having life. And those are separate questions. It might have had life and liquid water. It probably couldn't have had life and no liquid water, right? But it could also have had liquid water and no life. Strawberry Artery Official Bootleg Edition. for $2 says AIG is a bag of bulges of biblical proportions. Amazing. Okay, so now there have also been questions like, is it possible that life formed on Mars and then there was an impact which ejected some rock on which some of these like protobacterial spores hitched a ride to Earth? Now, one of the ideas why this might seem plausible is, one, we do know that Earth and Mars have had rocks from each other that, they can go back and forth, right? And also, it is possible that because Mars is farther away from Earth, or farther from the sun than Earth, there you go, I can talk, that it cooled off more rapidly, and therefore its habitable period started before Earth's did, so that its oceans formed first, which would mean that if life formed on Mars, it could have formed earlier there than it did on Earth, which could mean that one of the things that could have happened is that Earth first didn't form life, Mars formed it earlier, perhaps even, like a few 100 million years earlier, and then that life spread to Earth. But that's just an idea. That's not something that people are like, well, if there was water on Mars, then that's definitely what happened. It's also possible that Mars simply didn't actually have a significantly longer habitable period on it, or significantly earlier starting one, or that life never formed there, or that it did and never got transferred to Earth, or that life formed independently in both places, and even though Martian life may have made it to Earth, it didn't survive. Like, lots of these options. And it's not a question as to whether or not Mars ever had water. We know it did, right? It's definitive. Like, Michelle, do you know what a wadi is, right?
Yeah.
So, for those who don't know, wadis they're sometimes described as dry riverbeds, but that's not quite accurate, right? They're transitory riverbeds. So what happens is, in areas where they're basically deserts, water does sometimes, it rains sometimes, or it might snow or rain off in a mountain seasonally, and then that runoff channels down, right? Well, it's going to form streams and rivers just like it does anywhere else, except that they're temporary. And the bed of this river that's transitory is called a wadi. And so it's not like it's a river that's just gone forever. It's just a river that's not currently flowing. If you have a wadi, how confident can you be that there was once water in that spot?
Like 100%.
Yeah, basically, right? I guess someone could, dig out a fake wadi to trick you, but that seems extremely unlikely, right?
The devil dug fake wadis to test your faith.
Exactly. Similarly, we have dry riverbeds and flood channels on Mars. So, you can be just as confident that there was once liquid water on Mars. So, yeah.
Well, I think it was the Martian octopus or protocephalopod that dug those out, and they came to Earth.
But Mars didn't have water.
If you have liquid water, if you had, liquid water there, then obviously that means that octopus came from Mars.
Wait, I thought they came from Europa.
Possibly one species.
Okay. Yeah, well, as we all know,
There's only one way to find out. We got to go to Europa.
Cephalopods came from space,
report on it.
According to Raw Matt and basically no one else. All right, here we go.
I mean, how else are we going to know unless we go to Europa and report on it?
Yeah, we need to go to Europa. And Ganymede, for that matter.
Yeah.
Mostly because Ganymede has gravity.
Correct.
I mean, everything has gravity. Anyway, Vanelli 1998 for $5 says, God saw the Permian, late Devonian, KPG, and other extinctions and said, hold my wine. I can top those. Citation needed.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess God would drink wine. Yeah. There's a lot of references to wine in the Bible.
Well, it depends on what part of the text you're reading. God doesn't eat or drink anything. Or at least doesn't need to.
Yeah, need to.
Need to.
God can do what he wants. And if he wants to drink some wine, he can do it.
Sure, why not?
Yeah.
That's quite a leap of logic that I don't think they should make.
You're right.
Perfect.
Pete, you're right. That is quite the leap of logic. I'll take a drink for you getting that right, my dude.
Perfect. I love it.
It's almost like, for that reason, no one makes that leap. You're just imagining them doing it. Pibblepunk, the ordinary mammal who's been a member for 2 months and is at the amniote level, says, panspermia is a cool idea, but given the physics involved, it takes a lot of assumptions to present it as the most likely scenario. Citation needed. Yeah, no, I agree. It's not impossible, but it's almost never going to be the most plausible option. Yeah.
Yeah, and as someone like, maybe not Richard Carrier's not the best example of this, but there's a difference between possible and probable.
Yeah. Yep.
You've got to do a little heavy lifting there.
Look, could panspermia be true? Sure. Absolutely.
Sure.
Do I have any good
Is it
reason?
Possible? Yes. Is
Yeah.
it probable based on what we know? No.
Yeah, I don't have any reason to think that it's actually what happened. Savage quotes from random note cards. Cobra for $5 says, Martian life was known to create tripod-based technology according to the historical documents. It was written like an eyewitness. It must be true. It's true. War of the Worlds, definitely a historical documentary kind of a deal there. Yeah. Especially the Orson Welles version.
We have never seen anything that would tie those two things together.
Yes, that's true. That's why no one makes the... I'll just take a drink. I don't even know if it's for stupid or for true. It always amazes me when creationists say something that's both true and stupid at the same time. It happens
Hey,
a
have you
lot.
seen this leap of logic? It really tied the whole thing together.
And then you had to pee all over it.
Rude. Yeah.
But we do know that we have liquid water here, and it's very important to life on Earth.
Really? We have
So-
liquid water on Earth.
Yeah.
Who'd have thunk?
I'm not drinking for that being true. That's too basic.
We have found water on Mars for sure. There it is. You guys saw it here first.
I hate that
Oh my
landed,
god.
and I can't drink for it. Because that joke landed.
I don't... Why would you make up some stupid drawing when you can just go look at the polar caps?
Yeah, that are the permanent aspect of the polar of both the North and the South polar caps on Mars are in fact water ice.
Just why?
Yeah, they have
Oh my
transitory
goodness.
dry ice caps that grow and shrink with the seasons, but there's a core of just water ice. Yep.
Water on Mars. Oh well.
Oh well.
Also in the Weekly World News, right next to Who's Your
Oh my-
Daddy, the outrageous new TV show.
No.
I think he's still,
Oh.
sorry. I think he's still trying to say that this is a joke, right? Like, I don't think he's trying to say that this is an actual source that people are trying to portray as the Noah's Ark really being found on Mars. But it's hard to tell.
Poe's law.
Yeah, we are sort of in... I mean, creationism as a whole is sort of in Poe's law territory, right? Because you get people saying things like, well, did you know that evolutionists think that dinosaurs farted themselves to death? And it's like, what? No one thinks that. No one has ever even suggested that. It's like, yeah, well, Fox News said they did. Well, okay.
Wow, great resource.
Yeah.
Very objective.
Yeah, I don't know.
Noah's Ark was found on Mars. It's a Bible shocker.
Sure, buddy. Sure,
They
buddy.
did have a lot of water there, didn't they? So there it is. Proof positive pictures of Noah's Ark on Mars. Well, the amazing thing is that ark is pretty accurate from the biblical description. It's not a little
it's
toy
not.
boat that we see.
Goodness.
I mean, the only boat I see is the obviously drawn in one, and the ones that are using what look like they might actually just be pictures from Mars that are just, vaguely boat-shaped rocks. I don't know. I don't know what his point is here. Anyone who cites the Weekly World News for anything other than what the Weekly World News says, which I don't know why you would ever need to know that, is probably doing something dumb. Because the Weekly World News is basically a comedy newspaper, right? It's there to not be taken seriously. So I suppose I should explain this, right? Because not everyone is, from the United States, which as far as I know is the only place that sells Weekly World News. It is a tabloid in the sense of it tells knowingly fake news stories in the form of a news story, like it's a parody newspaper, right? It has things like The Adventures of Bat Boy, which is a half bat, half human infant male who apparently hasn't aged in like 30 years.
I was literally talking to Dead Kennedy in space about that last night.
This,
Always a bat boy, never a Batman.
well, I mean, that might get them in trouble. Can't say Batman.
Batman, not Batman.
Okay. We can put the dash in there, so it's like more like Spider-Man instead of...
You don't even have to, just put a space.
Okay, fair enough. Anyway, so yeah, this is that kind of newspaper. People aren't supposed to believe these things. It's not even a tabloid in the sense of like the celebrity gossip tabloid, where it's like, you know, they're trying to report things that are at least approximately true about the celebrities, even though a lot of times it's just rumors and hearsay. No, this is just literally made up by the authors. It's just for fun. So I just want to make...
watch Men in Black.
Well, okay, yeah.
This is totally true.
That in itself, though, was a gag in the movie. So
yeah, love it.
So yeah, I wanted to explain that for the people who aren't Americans, because I realize that like this is sort of ubiquitous in like grocery store checkout aisles here in the United States.
Yeah.
But that's not the case everywhere. So yeah, here we go.
So often.
That's okay, because
and
the
I'll
UK
talk
has
about it in
the
a minute.
Daily Mirror.
Yeah.
It's pretty much the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it says in there that this is a huge boat that was found on Mars and it's been photographed well.
See, now I think he's taking this seriously. What do you... Because before, his tone seemed to imply that this is like, oh, this is a little joke. But now he's like reading what they're actually saying as if this is supposed to be a serious thing? I'm so confused.
I honestly can't tell. Like I said, Poe's Law.
Yeah.
I don't think this was even out before we had our Mars rovers, so I don't really think, I just wonder how many people actually believe these things, but you don't know. This is 2002.
I think he thinks that this was an actual report from someone who took it seriously. I don't think... Well, first of all, Bliss Winters, for $10, sent a Godzilla emoji. So we will take a drink. Thank you very much. That was very generous. I think what's happening right now is Pete Greer doesn't take this... He does not think this is true. But he thinks that this was a serious report that was actually reporting on something that someone said they had actually found Noah's Ark and had submitted this as evidence. I think he thinks that the Weekly World News is a serious newspaper that's actually trying to convince people of its stories.
I cannot bring myself to believe that. I can't. Like, I'm willing to call creationists dumb for a lot of, like, demonstrable reasons, but I cannot possibly believe that he thinks that's a serious publication.
I mean, I would love to agree with you, but I don't know. I don't know. I mean, look, if I had just told you in isolation that someone had said that the air in space had to be different, but there still had to be air so that the sun could still burn because it was on fire and needed oxygen, like, that doesn't sound like something someone would actually believe. And yet I know
it does, because I'm aware of J.M. Truth and Matt Powell.
But before those two, would you have thought that was something that someone would believe? Because before those two, I wouldn't have. All right, maybe. But that also doesn't seem more ridiculous than this to me. Or less. I don't know. Pillowpunk, the ordinary mammal. I just remembered the ordinary mammal. That was actually a reference.
Ordinary mammals.
I forgot about that. Like, what is an ordinary mammal? Who knows? But yeah, it says r/whoosh. Yeah, no, that's definitely what happened.
Yep.
All right.
So, what I wanted to say about these arcs...
Yeah, see, he just leaves it at that. Like, I don't think this was true, but I guess maybe someone did. I think that my take was right on that one. I mean, I'm not, gonna go, like...
And look, I know that there are people out there who think that the Weekly World News is reporting for real stuff. I know that there are people who unironically think that. I just can't bring myself to accept that he thinks that this is an actual publication. Like, that I don't know. I don't even know anymore. My brain melted.
I mean, I think his church website, which I'm not going to give out because I don't want people, like, going and bugging him. But I think his church website is, like, publicly available and has a phone number that you could call. I'm almost tempted to call Pete Greer, see if he's in the office, and say, so, hey, what do you think about the Weekly World News?
Oh my god, do it!
No, I'm not going to bug him. Yeah.
Just be like, hey, I just saw an old clip of yours, and I was just wanting to check.
It would be interesting. I don't know how it would work over the airwaves here, or the internet waves, or the series of tubes, because as we all know, the internet is a series of tubes that was created by Al
Yep.
Gore.
You can go to the internet.
Yeah, you can just go
It's
see
in the
it.
desert. I've
Mhm.
seen it on South Park.
Strawberry
You
Artificial
can reboot the internet.
Strawberry Artery Official Bootleg Edition for $10 says, "Is this like that episode of Futurama where they find an end of the world prophecy, but it turns out to be an end of Mars prophecy, except it's the flood? Did God kill all the Martians for their sins? I hope so. That would be cool." Now that, you know what, that would be an interesting fanfic, right? Someone write up a fanfic where all the events of Genesis are true, but they took place on Mars, and just no one figured that out. That would be cool. It would also be a little bit like the C.S.
Podcasting.
Lewis book Paralandra, but whatever.
Yeah.
Sorry, what were you about to say?
No, I was gonna say that, like, I'm sure that there are people out there who think the original Garden of Eden was Mars, and that our ancient alien ancestors were, expelled from Mars or had to leave Mars, and that's where the creation account comes from. Like, I know that there are people.
I mean,
who
I
believe
don't
that.
think that Mars is all that much less plausible than Missouri as the location of the Garden of Eden.
I'll be a colder degree before I recognize Madura.
The Simpsons. Here we go.
Is all of our children's books have those in it. And there's a little bit of a danger to that if we don't teach them how big the ark really was. Because they picture these things, and look at all the smiley faces looking down on billions of dead things floating in the water.
You know, even when I was a young Earth creationist, and I grew up with, toy arcs and whatnot, I'm pretty sure we had an arc-themed bath toy or something like that when I was a little, tyke. I was able to read Genesis, and, I read the flood account, and I, probably had to at some point ask what a cubit was, but, like, I had an idea that it was a really big boat, and that the cartoons were no more realistic about the boat than they were about, like, the animals or the people. Like, now look, I don't have a lot of day-to-day interaction with, like, human larvae. That's the right term, right?
Yes.
Okay, just making sure. So maybe I'm just wrong about this, right? Maybe human larvae are way, way less intelligent than I think. I feel like most kids figure out by the time they're like 8 or 9 years old that the cartoon arc is not the same thing as what's described in the actual text of Genesis. Maybe not. If anyone else has like counter examples or, knows of kids who did think that, let me know.
It's just not an accurate portrayal of what's going on.
Yeah, it's a cartoon, Pete. It's a cartoon. Clouds don't actually look like that. The sun doesn't actually have little black spokes coming out of it. Waves don't form spirals like that. Also,
Goodness.
are those rivets on a wooden boat? Looks like it. I mean, I guess they could be nails, but like, yeah, also the bow probably didn't have a spiral like come on, man. Of course it's a cartoon. It's not going to be accurate. I'm just taking a drink. I just can't with it. It's not accurate. Yeah, it's a cartoon, my dude. Let's see. Jillian Wren says that their kids only know about the Ark through, like, me and Erica. Hey, you know what? It's a good place to get your Ark information. It's me and Erica. Because we won't just make up random crap about the Ark. Nor will we pretend that the Bible has the names of Noah's wife and his son's wives, because why would you want to name women? They're not important to the story. I mean, to be fair, the Bible actually does name a lot of women, which is not something all holy texts do. You know how many women actually get a name in the Quran?
I don't know.
Well, 1 or 2, because the Quran mixes up Mary, the mother of Jesus, and Miriam, the sister of Moses, and kind of conflates them into the same person, because it's the same name. So yeah, the Quran definitely has the sister of Moses giving virgin birth to Jesus. Which is weird, but, so yeah, that's a 1 or 2, depending on how you count.
And the flood, and why the ark had to be built in the first place. So, if our children grow up thinking that's what the ark was,
then I'm sorry, but you just have dim children. Right?
Yeah.
Like, not everyone's going to be a super genius. You might just have a stupid kid, and that's okay. You know what? Not everything in life is about being a big brain, right? I know a lot of great people who aren't the sharpest tools in the shed. That's okay. Just accept that you know, maybe your kid, a little slow, probably not going to win the Nobel Prize, but you know what? They can be a kind, generous, loving person who, you know, has a great career doing something that isn't super, you know, intellectual, but there's still plenty of great careers out there that you can have. Yeah, maybe that's your kid. And you know what? That's fine.
Then when somebody says, well, how did they get the dinosaurs on the ark? The children are going to, young adults are going to say, well, they couldn't do it, could they? It's just a little bitty boat. It would have turned over on the first wave.
I've never heard anyone ever say that. I'm taking a drink. This is just him basically making up problems that no one is having. And you know why I think he's doing it? It's because he knows that he can easily show why that's not a problem. It's like, all these, you know, silly people think that the ark was actually made of asbestos, and that would give all the animals and the people on the ark horrible, horrible lung cancer. And I happen to know that the ark wasn't made of asbestos, so that silly argument is defeated. See? The ark's true. Yeah, except no one ever said the ark was made of asbestos, man. You can't just make up problems that no one has with the ark. The problem people have with dinosaurs on the ark isn't that they think it would tip the boat over because it's so tiny. The problem is things like, is there actually enough room for this many much, much bigger than elephant type animals and their feed and their water? Because I can guarantee you, you're not going to be able to use the water outside the ark, because even if we pretend that that water wasn't going to be salty or at least brackish, it's full of dead, rotting things. You can't just drink that.
Yeah.
Right?
Also, in response to Ugly German Truth's question in the chat, he asked if the word for ark was the same thing as the basket that Moshe was put in. The answer is yes. Teva is the word for that, or tevat, depending on how you're conjugating it in the sentence. So yeah, those are equivalent words.
Yep.
And it doesn't mean that Moshe was put in a gigantic freaking boat. It's just more or less referring to like that kind of container that.
Yeah, it's a container that you keep things safe in.
Like like a chest or a box, but chest is probably a better English word.
Yeah, the way I think of it is like, this is where you put things to keep them safe. And so, yeah, that's the same word there. Jesus wasn't made of plastic, Jillian Wren said. Probably not. I wasn't there, so I guess I can't say for certain, Ken Ham. But I'm going to go out on a limb and say that probably not. Although technically, nothing in the gospel says that he wasn't made of plastic. Just that's also true. Yeah. It doesn't say, and Jesus was made of not plastic. Although I guess it does talk about Jesus being in the flesh, which probably means he was made of meat. So I guess you could probably use that to say that it was like not plastic. I don't know. I'm not here to describe how the Bible works.
That's the picture that they have of the ark. So, in our field of influence with our children, our grandchildren, nephews, and nieces.
Oh, look, it's Godzilla. Take a drink.
Woohoo!
We need to make this truth known. The ark was a huge ship, and we're going to see that in just a minute.
Dude, everyone knows that. I refuse to believe that there are any adults out there, or even teenagers, heck, even like preteens, right? Like 10, 11, 12, who, if you asked and they're familiar with the story of Noah's Ark, would not know that the ark was a very big ship.
So we got to be careful this doesn't happen in our families. He loves the story of Noah's Ark because it's all about a cute boat full of animals. Later on, he's rejecting the Bible, and he rejects the story of Noah's Ark because it's about a cute boat full of animals.
Again, Pete, you know that's not what's happening. You know these kids aren't growing up, going to college, and then thinking, well, gee, how could the ark work if it was only 20 feet long? You know that's not what's happening, man. Why are you talking about...
What is this? An ark for ants?
Exactly. This needs to be at least 3 times as big. A star you says AIG is a bag of Martian worms. Nice. That was for $1.99 US. Thank you. yeah, Pete, what are you doing? All right, we'll hit play.
So it says stop mything the boat. Okay, we don't want to.
Yeah, we don't want to mythologize this actual myth.
Yeah, really.
Yeah, that would not be unacceptable.
Yeah, that just won't do.
Scripture, we want to see what it actually says and accurately portray it to our children. Make sure they know.
Yeah, actually, hello, my name is Fearmonger. Defnautatangelo says, why are all these kids leaving? Couldn't have anything to do with my raging bigotry, could it? Yeah, so actually there have been, like, actual studies, because one of the problems that a lot of Christian groups are having right now is that they are having abysmal retention rates among their children, right? Like, there are groups that are having, like, 60, 70, 80% of the people raised in that group leaving it by the time that they are adults. And so, this is of concern to those groups, because most groups would prefer to continue on into the future, especially those who are members of religions that feel like they have exclusive claims and should be proselytizing, which is most versions, but not all versions of Christianity. The Quakers and the Amish and Mennonites broadly tend not to. Actually, they definitely don't proselytize. You can join, but they don't go out seeking converts. But most Christian groups do. And so, they've done polls. And what people report back tends not to be like, evolution. That happens occasionally. But it's usually things like, there was too much hypocrisy in the church. There was too much hateful rhetoric in the church. There was various other things like that. Like the moral teachings of the church didn't actually seem to be moral. Things like that's what people tend to have problems with. It was the bad actions of people in the church and what they perceived as immoral teachings in the church. Now, after that comes things like, I don't think there was sufficient evidence for the historical accuracy of the texts of the Bible. That's like in like third or fourth place. And then way down at the bottom, it's stuff like, well, I think, humans and chimpanzees share a common ancestor. That's way low on the list. If Christians want to maintain their, kids in the religion, they really only have two options. One is the option that a lot of churches are going, which is to go with extremely costly displays of belief, which basically just means the harder it is to be a member of this religion, the more likely your kids are to take it seriously because they see you engaging in things that are very costly, which you would not do if you did not believe in the religion, and therefore they tend to stay. And that's where you get things like what are now some of the only growing denominations of Christianity in the United States, which are extremely, I don't want to say conservative because it doesn't mean a whole lot in this context, but you guys will probably know what I mean if I say that. They're very literal. They have very strict moral rules about like things like code of conduct, dress, not drinking alcohol, things like that, right? And then you have the other option, which is to just address the problems that the kids are seeing, like the hypocrisy or the teachings that they find immoral. But right now, the groups that are doing that in Christianity are also abandoning the costly displays, which means that the kids don't have any good reason to think that it's true, which means they tend to leave anyway. So, it now creates this thing where like Christianity is tending to shrink in the United States, but on the other hand, the parts that aren't shrinking tend to be getting worse and worse and worse. So I don't have a solution for the Christians on that, but it is what's happening. And bathtub arcs, not part of the problem, at least not in any significant way. So, yeah, here we go.
The real view of it. So, what does the Bible say? It says that it will be 300 cubits, and the breadth 50 cubits, and the height 30 cubits. Which you can see the dimensions there. If you use a regular cubit, which is about 18 inches, and that's just a measure from here to here on a man. But in the Noah's Ark that they're building for Answers in Genesis, they're using a royal cubit because before the flood, we think that humans might have been a little bit bigger than they are now, a little bit healthier. The environment was more conducive to, grow big things. We see things in the fossil record.
I hate that bit. That things were big in the fossil record because the pre-flood world was better. My favorite bit with that was
it was like a hyperbaric chamber.
Yeah, I was going to go into that. My favorite bit with that was when Carl Baugh decided to create a hyperbaric like terrarium, and he said that he was growing giant piranhas in it, but it was actually just pacu, which are related to piranhas, but aren't piranhas and are naturally much bigger than piranhas. And like that was his best evidence, was like, look at the size of the piranhas I grew in my terrarium. And it's like, dude, those aren't even piranhas. What are you doing? Although I will say his terrarium actually looked pretty cool. It was in like an actual hyperbaric chamber that was big enough to like walk into, and it had like a pond section at the bottom, and then it had like shelves with plants, and it had sun lamps to help, get the plants enough sunlight and whatnot. So it was a cool setup, right? I like the idea. It was neat. It just didn't do a damn thing to show that the pre-flood world was so much better. So, I'll give some credit where it's due. It was a cool setup. I don't even know if it still exists. It might. No idea. So
time for a break, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. So what I'm going to do is, unless you have anything real quick that you want to say before we go on break, I'm going to send us to a break. I'll get myself a fresh drink. And you guys will be regaled by the musical stylings of one Beethoven.
Yay.
Yeah. Bent has some good music. Which, by the way, if you want stuff like behind the scenes early access to his music, like work in progress cuts, direct recordings that like you just get the raw recording from when he plays some music or something, he has a Patreon in the description. I think it starts at like $1. So if that's something you're interested in, do check that out. Anyway, we're going to be right back. Okay, we are back. Welcome back, Vishanti. How was your break?
Good. Got some fresh drink.
Me too. I've got some vodka in here. I mean, this is basically like vodka and fruit juice.
Nice.
So yeah. So first, there's a couple things. read a super chat. A star you for $9.99 US said, saying the Earth was better before the flood sounds a lot like blaming climate change on God. Yeah. Which, frankly, is a lot more damning than saying we did it. Isn't he supposed to be omnibenevolent? So one of the things is that, like, the idea of omnibenevolence is not something that you can find in Genesis, right?
Yeah.
So that is a much later idea, and the fact that it doesn't track very well with the flood story is one is something people have noticed, including, you know, various theologians. But yeah, it's important to remember that Genesis was not written with, like, modern Christian theology in mind. So, yeah. Now, Captain Reinid... Oh, I guess never mind. I guess that was going to answer a question there, but it's been deleted, which means I don't think that the person who sent it still wants it answered. So, before we get back into this, I'll give my quick little plug here after the break. So, this channel is almost entirely supported directly through the generosity of its viewers, right? We're kind of like PBS. Get a little bit from other sources, in this case, you know, ads rather than the federal government. But that amount of money does not cover nearly all of the expenses of keeping this channel going. A lot of which are just, you know, keeping me alive, which I want to keep doing for a while. Yeah. So, if you would like to see this channel keep on going, keep up with its, you know, every once in a while 4, we did 4 videos this week, pace, then there are some great ways to do that. I suggest there's Patreon, where you can start at just $1 a month, or you can even go for, like, I think it's $10, 20 cents US a year if you go annually, because the annual thing gets you, I believe, a 12% discount. You get early access to months and months of videos. Vishanti can attest. You're a channel member,
Yes.
which also gets that. And there's just hours
Mhm.
and hours of content that you can just get access to immediately. There's also a Discord server that is only available to people who are supporting the channel, and this also goes for channel members. There's a link right below the video that says join channel. You can do that. It also starts at $1 a month. You can also give more if you want more perks. You can get your name in the credits starting at $5. At $20, you'll be one of the names that I actually say. You can also get other things like if you're on Patreon and you're giving 10 or more a month, you can get access to some of the 3D stuff that I do. You can just get that file and use it for whatever you want. Yeah, so that can really help. If that's not your thing, if you don't want to do like an annual or a monthly thing, there's also a merch store that's linked in the description. You can get blankets, you can get t-shirts, you can get mugs, pillows, all sorts of stuff. Like, I'm pretty sure Robert, Bob Knob, who was in the channel, he just got a membership today. I'm pretty sure he uses a Dapper Dino pillow as a butt pillow for his desk chair. Which
Yeah.
I'm perfectly happy with that. Go for it, man. You want to sit on like a Dapper Dino pillow? Feel free. Anyway, and if like a monetary thing, there's also a wish list, right? There's a wish list in the description if you want to get me something from my Amazon wish list. There's books. It's mostly stuff that's like recreational stuff, I'll be honest. There is a ridiculously expensive recording booth that I would like to get at some point, but like, whatever. It's mostly just recreational stuff, so I can, have some fun. So that's there too. But if you just can't afford it, or you just don't want to, do any kind of monetary support, please make sure you like the video, share this video with people you think will enjoy watching it, and watch some of my videos, hopefully a few in a row. The algorithm has not been very nice to me the past month and a half or so, really more like the past couple months. So any extra watching of my videos is greatly appreciated. This week, though, was actually pretty great. Both my videos this week are still doing really well, at least for me. So I want to say thank you for that. And also, I want to say, it actually has been a really good, successful week this week here on YouTube. And that's a big part of the people who are my channel members and my patrons. So I want to say thank you to you guys. If you guys are part of that team, the ones who are supporting me directly, you're a big part of any success this channel has. This channel would not be able to do it without you. So please know that I am very grateful for that. All right. Anyway, let's get back into this Pete Greer thing. What do you think?
Sure.
Okay.
Laid down during the flood, we believe, that show that things were bigger back then than they are now. So we think that maybe humans were too. So they're using a royal cubit, which is about 21 inches. So the ark is going to be a little bit over 500 feet long.
I'll just say this. If you're trying to get a literal length of the ark, as long as you use any like historically attested cubit, I think that's probably fine. As long as it's like attested roughly in the region where Genesis would have been written. So we're talking like Levantine and Mesopotamia, right? Maybe some Egyptian ideas, because Egypt was pretty culturally influential all the way even into like parts of like what's now Pakistan. So, you know,
yeah,
I'll grant you Egypt too. Now, if you're like, oh well, you know, the Chinese had this cubit-like measurement, I'll be like, no, man, come on, no,
nah.
But if it's like from like modern Iraq, modern Pakistan, modern like Jordan, Israel, Syria, Lebanon, Egypt, any of those like those types of places, yeah, sure, that's fine. That's great. Savage quotes from random note cards. Cobra for $2 says, "Where in Genesis is the cubit defined?" It's not. It's part of the yeah. It's one of those things that you're assumed to know because it was a common thing in the cultural milieu. It's sort of like, you know, those Roman dodecahedra. Why would you write down what those are for? Everyone knows what those are for.
Everybody knows what they are.
Yeah. Now, thousands of years later, we're like, what the heck is this? What does it do? No one knows. So yeah,
That's how they were playing D&D, obviously.
I mean, maybe that one queen who had one buried with her was just like a really avid D&D player.
That's right.
All right, here we go.
Everything increases by about 30%. So this is what it would look like if you just used a regular cubit. It's still a huge shift. About 522 railroad cars, stock cars.
Americans will do anything to avoid using the metric system.
Yeah, cubic meters? No. Stock cars. But the thing is, it's like when you say 522 railroad stock cars, like I only have a vague idea of how big a stock car is.
You're right.
Like, I see trains, right? Like there's trains around here, so like sometimes I get stuck behind a train or something. But like if you ask me, hey, what's the internal volume of a stock car? I'd be like, I don't know. It's big, I guess. Whatever. So, yeah. At least he's not measuring them in giraffe volumes.
Of animals, and of course they need to get food and other things on there too. So
one of the things I find that
I'm sorry, there's more than one window on there. I don't like that drawing. Fair.
There was only one window as prescribed in Genesis, which really causes some problems for airflow. So one thing is that with the food, right? The big objection isn't just that there wasn't enough space to fit all the food, because there wasn't. But another big thing is you need to keep the food from spoiling for over a year, right? And you have animals.
Good luck with that.
Right. You have animals with highly specific dietary needs. And what are you gonna feed all the carnivores? And I don't care. I'm sorry. There is just no good reason to think that animals weren't eating meat before the flood, given their dentition. You can say, oh, well, sharp teeth don't indicate that it ate meat. You know what? When it's a mammal and it has sharp carnassials like a lion, it does mean that. Until someone can find me a mammal whose actual diet is counterindicated by their molars, it's just a dumb argument. And it's even worse for reptiles, right? Because reptile teeth are basically the same shape all throughout their jaw with very little variation. Which means if they have sharp, recurved, serrated steak knife teeth, guess what they were eating? Yeah, basically steaks. Because there's a reason you make a knife like that.
They were peeling the rinds off of fruit.
Yeah, obviously. And so, how are you going to keep meat for a year fresh for a T-Rex
without a freezer?
Right, no freezer. At best, you could salt things, but you know what? You're going to be giving things a really lot of salt for a whole year. I'm pretty sure that line is not going to do too well with a salt overdose for a year.
How long did it take him to smoke and dry all of the meat that they would need to take?
Oh, well, see, he had 100 years to build the ark, so presumably he had plenty of time to at least smoke the meat. But then you get other things
Also,
I'm sorry.
I really love the way that Ugly German Truce is discussing this. He's like, hey, isn't the window supposed to be a long uninterrupted slit beneath the whole roof? And yeah, maybe. See, now you're thinking like a rabbi. It doesn't have to be one tiny little window. It could just be one really super long window.
Yeah. And I guess in that case, you could say those are just support pillars rather than separate windows. Of course, at that point, like, the difference between one window and several windows becomes a little bit, like, unclear.
Right.
Anyway.
Now we're talking.
But, like, also there's things like koalas need not just fresh eucalyptus leaves. They need them on a branch. If you collect a bunch of eucalyptus leaves in a bowl and put it in front of a koala, it will not understand that that's food.
Nope.
Because
and they
koalas
have tree preferences.
Yes. Koalas are literal smooth brains. They actually don't have any folds in their brain. They are extremely dumb. Also, things like anteaters. Anteaters need to either have live ants to eat, or you need to yourself collect live ants and turn them into a slurry so that you can syringe feed them.
Well, Dapper, you see, that's not how they ate before the flood. Like, their diets weren't this specialized. They were totally fine. Like, before
Anteaters don't even
flood,
have teeth. What else were they going to eat?
Look, before the flood, they were fine eating just any old eucalyptus off any old thing. They'd eat it off the ground. They probably ate other stuff. But then when they got launched out of a volcano to Australia, they had a hyper specialized diet.
Oh, okay. Strawberry Artery Official Bootleg Edition for $10 says, I grew up in a super insulated YEC community, and I never once heard anyone argue that our actual faith should be based on the literal history of Genesis and not, I don't know, Jesus? Priorities, guys. Yeah, it is a little odd the degree to which, as a Christian, young Earth creationists tend to, especially the ones who are really big on pushing it, tend to de-emphasize Jesus. And they'll come like, well, it comes back to Jesus.
Yeah, that's like AIG's whole, like, thing.
Yeah, it's so rare that I ever hear them actually talk about Jesus actually, right? They'll be like, oh, well, Jesus believed this. Now let's get back to Genesis. It's like, hey, could you talk about, like a story in the gospel, maybe? Like what about the Beatitudes? How do you feel about the Beatitudes, Ken Ham? I have no idea how Ken Ham feels about the Beatitudes. Based on his politics, I imagine he doesn't like them very much.
No, probably not.
But Savage quotes from random note cards. Cobra for $2 says, koalas had wrinkly brains before the flood. There you go. It's the curse of sin smoothed out the koala brain.
Yeah, and like the heat from the volcanoes like melted the wrinkles, so it's all like a blob now.
Okay, yeah, no, I get that. That makes all the sense. Yeah. Oh, actually, so Aristoteles says Jesus was too woke for them. There was actually an article put out by a pastor not that long ago. I wish I remember what it was.
Oh my god, I
so
saw this.
Find it.
Saying Jesus is weak.
Yeah, they were saying like, oh, this the stuff you're saying about Jesus, it's too weak and you know, like
it's too weak.
Yeah. And he's like, it's literally just from the gospel. I'm like, yeah, but you know, that's probably not good enough today. We need to be stronger. And by which they just mean just giant asses. Like, oh, yeah. Okay. Like, how to tell that maybe you're a little bit off base is that when, like, the actual person who you build your identity around is too much of a weakling for you. Maybe just I don't know, stop pretending you're a Christian. Like, I don't know what pretending. Just go find something else to be, other than saying that you're a Christian. If you don't like Jesus, right? Like, I'm not a big fan of saying, like, this is not a true Christian, but you should at least like Jesus if you're going to be a Christian, right? I feel like that, at least.
I guess maybe.
I mean, I'm not in charge of who is and isn't a Christian. I just feel like if you dislike Jesus, you should find something else to do.
Yeah, it's very bizarre that you would kind of hold to the religion where he is the primary character.
Right, yeah. It's like not too many people going around like, oh man, Buddha was a dick. Now I'm going to go to the Buddhist temple. Like, oh, okay, sure, right. I guess you can do that. It's weird. That's all I'm saying. I guess I can't say that they're not Christians. It's just weird. All right, here we go.
Why do most arts look so small and overcrowded? Well, because they're cute and they're trying to sell books. That's the answer. You know?
That's true. That is why cartoon arts are drawn like cartoons.
Like a drink.
Yep. You figured it out, Pete. It's not a sinister conspiracy theory from Satan to trick your kids into thinking the ark was only 20 feet long. Heather Kuhn for $5 says, regarding feeding carnivores, breed the rodents, lagomorphs, and guinea pigs and feed them to the carnivores. I mean, yeah, I guess that might be able to work. Although I don't know how much, like, could you really feed, like, a T-Rex and like a bunch of big cats, or maybe just one big cat, right? We'll go with the kinds thing, but then also like a bear and like crocodiles or something. Or maybe crocodiles could live outside the ark. I don't know. I don't know how all of it works. But like, could you just do that with like feeder rodents and lagomorphs, I guess? By the way, guinea pigs are rodents, so it's a little redundant there. But yeah. Guinea pigs are actually part of Caviomorpha, which is like the South American rodents. And they're very distinctively, they have three toes on their hind feet. It's big distinctive for them. Like capybaras, guinea pigs, a few other rodents that are less well known. The agouti, also a caviomorph.
Oh,
Yeah, agoutis are cute. People don't talk about them enough.
they are.
Granted, capybaras are amazing, and I get why they get the spotlight so much, but agoutis are really cool too. All right, here we go.
I doubt if anybody's actually doing that to be evil. That our enemy loves to use things like that to cause confusion. He's the author of confusion.
He's so close.
So
I know he could just be like,
God.
oh, maybe it's just a thing, because he's like, no, it's actually, even if it's innocent, Satan is using it anyway. The armies of hell are mustered against Christians, and they're using as their one of their primary weapons cartoon arcs.
Baby animals.
It's like, okay, sure.
For even Satan himself disguises himself as a pygmy hippo.
You know, that would get me caught off guard. I would not suspect it. I'd be like,
Just
oh, little pygmy hippo. And then Satan pops out like, damn.
Satan pops up like, ha
I have you now. Like, yeah, hey, you know what, Satan?
have you now.
You got me with that one. I was not expecting that.
You got me.
Zerolon for $5 says, I have a full set of encyclopedias from the 60s. That makes me cutting edge for YEC research true. Thus says the sack of phallic members that is AIG. Take a drink for that. Yeah, it really is kind of embarrassing the degree to which creationism likes to stay like 50 plus years behind.
it's huge.
Well, it's because they can have plausible deniability. Their whole shtick is evolution doesn't have it figured out, and look how silly it is. And then if they look at current research, they'll obviously see how incredibly dipshittery it is.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's important to me to know that the people from the past believed in a literal ark, because if they didn't believe in a literal ark, then
did they though?
I mean, I'm sure some did.
Well, sure, some did, but I'm gonna need him to provide, like, hey, how do you know they took that literally, and in what numbers?
Yeah, I don't have like a lot of like census data from, you know, like first century Judea. I was gonna say Palestine, but it wasn't really designated as Palestine until like late in the first century.
Yeah,
so
at that time it was. Yeah, it was called Judea. But it's like, look, even when you're reading like commentaries, they're like, "Yo, if you take this literally, you're a fool."
Yeah,
that's one of my favorite little bits of Rashi, where he's talking about like the first part of Genesis. He's like, "If you think these are literal 6 days, you're a freaking fool."
Mm-hmm. Too young to feel this old.
Like, yeah.
For $5.69, nice. It says, much like the food one would buy for their pet bearded dragons, AIG or a bag of mealworms, Dapper loves pelagic tunic. He does not love pelagic tunicates. It's a lie.
Just accept it.
Accept what? The lie?
You do love them. You know you do, deep down.
I don't. I despise them. From the tip of my snout down to
Ceratosaurus doth protest too much.
Who are you, Hamlet?
No.
Okay. Because it's a Hamlet line, you know.
I know.
Okay. You know what that reminds me? The Conscience of a King. It's a good episode of Star Trek. Watch that sometime, everybody.
The question. All right, so I found some scriptures where they did verify it's a literal ark. Second.
Okay. I'm glad that you found some passages in the Bible that say that other parts of the scriptures that those people were familiar with are a thing. I don't particularly care.
Peter 2:5.
We're going to try and skip ahead a little bit. Hopefully not crash.
The ancient world. First will come in the last day, beginning of for the flood. Then we've had cemetery. Peter 3:5 didn't exist. It was made into.
Wait, are these all going to be from 2 Peter? That'd be weird.
Probably.
All right. Well, I'm going to keep skipping ahead, but if it doesn't get out of 2 Peter, I'm just going to go ahead and say, I don't know. That doesn't seem like a comprehensive survey of the attitudes towards the flood from like just the authors of the New Testament. But okay.
Right, because I mean, like, there is a little bit in the Gospels there where, Jesus is using it as an example,
Mhm.
but it's like, get out of just Peter. Why wouldn't you go directly to the primary, like, guy that you're worshiping? I don't understand this.
The weird thing to me, though, is like when people are like, oh, well, Jesus used this as an example, therefore he must have believed it. I'm like, people use examples from fiction and other legends that like they don't believe are literally true all the time, right?
Does that mean that Paul, like, believed Greco-Roman, like, myths and gods and stuff because he used them, or
Yeah.
Peter did?
Yeah, I don't know. Like, and like even things that aren't like religiously significant. Like, how many people in the past have used like various movie or book villains to compare to people they don't like? Like, if I compare you to like Darth Vader or Lord Voldemort, that is not an indication that I believe that either of those characters are real. It's just that there's a cultural touchstone that people are familiar with, and I could use it as an example. I really don't get that insistence that like if Jesus said that talked about this event, that event must have been something he believed in. And then, since we've already concluded that he's definitely God, that means the event is real. Like, that chain of logic just falls apart for me. I just don't buy it.
Yeah.
Whole different form during the flood. For fire to show there's enough to persuade kings in Hebrews.
Oh, okay, we got Hebrews. All right, not all 2 Peter.
Oh, all right.
Yeah.
7, by faith Noah righteousness and righteousness, according to the literal flood, will save. Faith.
All right.
So that person, most people say Paul wrote Hebrews, but there's some question there. But whoever wrote it definitely believed in a literal flood.
Zerulon says there's a fantasy.
Did they?
Yeah, that's a good question. Zerulon says there is a fantasy novel series that uses a modern setting and references real people and places. Does that make it real at Dapper Dinosaur? Yes. Yes, it does.
Obviously using that logic.
Yep. I mean, if they reference real things, then it must be a true story. That's how stories work. Which actually, interestingly enough, the actual reference to real things, but very incorrectly, is one of the reasons that most scholars consider the story of Judith, which is part of the Apocrypha, to be an intentional work of fiction. Like, the author intended this to be a fictional story, not something that people were supposed to believe in. Because basically, it very obviously misstates the capital of the empire in question. That's the antagonist of the story of Judith.
Oh my god, I just now noticed. Hey, Kip Davis in the chat. What's up?
Oh, hey!
Kip? I just have to look away from the screen long enough because I'm still multitasking for my costume, and I just looked up and was like, hey, there you go.
Yeah, and Dr. Kip Davis points out that Jesus told parables. Parables are fiction. Yeah, Jesus was perfectly okay with using fiction. He made up his own stories. And the thing is, even most Christians don't think that, like, the parable of, like, the servants and the tenants, or, like, the parable of, like, the wedding feast, or, like, the prodigal son are literal things that happen. Like, you could go back in time and find that prodigal son and his rich dad. No one as far as I know, no Christians even think that. And yeah, Kip Davis' Judith Kick, that's a great story, right? I'm not in any way trying to disparage Judith, but, like, there's a good chance it was written intentionally to be fictional. Like, that's a thing that could be happening.
You know, humans are storytellers, and we like telling stories
right?
about things.
Plus, there's also the fact that, the first few chapters of Genesis aren't internally consistent. Chances are the compilers of Genesis didn't fail to notice that, right? Because they weren't stupid. These were people who were highly educated scribes who had a very solid grasp of things like grammar, poetry, style, narrative flow, things like that. They probably noticed that they were compiling not entirely compatible stories, and they were doing it because they were trying to collect the sacred stories of the people whose identity they were trying to preserve. And the idea of
one of those things where I am quite literally begging atheists to stop saying Bronze Age or Iron Age goat herders. Like, shut up. These people were literate. They understood wordplay. Mm-hmm. Tell me you don't know anything about the text without telling me you don't know anything about the text. Just, good grief. You don't have to be ignorant.
Kip Davis says Esther was also most likely intended as fiction. Yeah. So, while I do say that when people are like, oh, the Bible is fiction, it's like, no, that misunderstands the genre of most of the Bible. It's not all of the Bible.
I love Purim. I love that holiday. It's so fun.
Yeah.
I love how Judaism has a cosplay and get drunk holiday. It's great.
where drunkenness is mandatory, at least according to some people.
That's right. That's right.
All right, here we go.
So after Eden, the story of Noah's flood isn't real. Noah could never have fit all those animals into the ark. This is a big thing that scoffers will say. And so the other guy says, well, how big was the ark and how many animals did Noah need in it? The scoffer says, I don't know, but Noah could never have fit all those animals into the ark.
You know, it's an interesting thing because I've made that basic argument. Like, the ark isn't big enough to fit the animals needed. But when I do that, I do things like I check the dimensions. I do the math. I check how much feed and water various animals need. I check with things like, hey, what animals do various organizations that believe in this say had to be on the ark? Like, what are their estimates? And when you work it out, you come down to like, yeah, there's no way to fit that many animals on with their food and their water and to have only 8 people take care of them for over a year. There just isn't enough manpower. There isn't enough space. And could I tell you off the top of my head? No, but when you actually do the math, yeah, it doesn't really work out. Sorry. Like, even the most conservative estimates for how many, or not, I don't know, the smallest estimate, we'll say that, the smallest estimates, because I say conservative like it means something in this context. Even the most, like the smallest number of animal, like when you figure out like what are they, like yeah, it doesn't really work out. And then some of the various rescuing devices that they come with, like maybe it was babies, like baby elephants. Do you know what happens to elephant populations when they lose a significant portion of adults, and especially adult males? They collapse because the baby elephants can't learn how to socialize properly with other elephants, and they become antisocial dicks who kill each other.
Hey, speaking of antisocial dicks, Kip Davis was saying the Essenes hated Purim because they were super boring snobs.
That sounds terrible. Why would you?
Suck, boring snobs.
That's like some Jehovah's Witness level nonsense. Like, oh, we're not going to celebrate any holidays. Like, dude, that's so boring. Like, why would you skip one of the most fun holidays in the year? Come on.
They're just like, yeah, we're going to go live in our little isolated corner and write all these texts and not celebrate parties with raucous,
and remember,
cheering and jeering.
If you pour clean water into unclean water, the uncleanness of the water travels up into the vessel. Remember. That's how it works.
Oh my goodness, of course it does.
Now that's
exactly how it works.
That is some extreme inside baseball Judaism trivia.
Yes.
All right, here we go.
So if you believe an unknown number of animals cannot fit into an unknown sized ark, check your math. There may be more known about the ark than you know.
I did check my math. That's the thing, Pete. It didn't work out. Sorry.
And that's the truth. That's why we need to get this information out there. How big it was, how many animals did he have to put on there? These are all questions that we can at least take a reasonable estimate of.
No,
it's
not reasonable at all.
No, it's not. In fact, interestingly enough, one of the primary reasons that creationists came up with their idea of kind being anything other than species, because I want to remind you, the word that is translated in our English Bibles as kind was specifically translated as species into Latin in the Vulgate. And that is the reason that people like Carolus Linnaeus, when talking about very specific varieties of life, use the word species. There's a long history of people who treat the current idea of species as the biblical idea of kinds, right? The only reason that creationists bumped this up to higher taxonomic levels was because they knew they couldn't fit enough animals on the ark. This is entirely just a post hoc hand wavy, like, oh, evolution's fine, but only if it's, proto-dogs turning into all the modern canids. Yeah, that's fine. Yep, that helps us fit the animals.
And when he's talking about all this stuff, and you're discussing like how species got rendered in the Latin Vulgate and all that, can I just say that I hate baraminology? I hate the idea of baramin and how they try to make that a thing. It just causes me psychic damage.
I especially hate it because it's very clear that whoever came up with the term baramin doesn't know any Hebrew.
Gee.
I know, shocker, right? Yeah.
Shocking.
Yeah. Another one of my favorites is that anytime that AIG uses a picture of a Torah scroll, it's almost always upside down.
It's upside down.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Because then it looks left justified. So it looks like normal text to them. Because, of course, Hebrew being written right to left is right justified. So, yeah.
And it's aligned from the top of a line.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's another thing is the
It's
Latin
just-
alphabet
oh my
is
goodness.
aligned from a base, and then sometimes there's descenders. But Hebrew has a horizontal line that things descend from. And then occasionally there's ascenders, like, you know, the Hebrew
Lamed.
version of yeah, that's what I was going to pick as an example.
Yeah.
Strawberry Artery official bootleg edition for $5 says, "Wait, Dapper, are you telling me that you can convey ideas through stories that aren't literally true? Sounds made up. I bet you're not even real." Busted. For all you know, I'm not even really a Ceratosaurus.
What?
I mean, I am, obviously, but for all you know, maybe I'm not.
Obviously.
Yeah, clearly.
I mean, you showed everyone the photo of us at the Natural History Museum in LA.
Yeah,
Obviously, it's Ceratosaurus.
how else would I get that
was
photo?
there.
Yeah.
Right.
Savage quotes from random note cards cover for $5 says, "Remember, Genesis was written in the Bronze Age in early modern English."
Oh my.
Yes, it definitely wasn't written in the Iron Age in Hebrew. That's definitely not what happens. Actually, one of the great ways that you can tell the Bible is an Iron Age book is that the farther into the Bronze Age it goes in terms of its historical narrative, the less like real life it becomes. The less likely it is to get the details and the chronology and the names right. And then when you get into the Iron Age, suddenly things become much, much more like historically plausible and consistent with like what we know from archaeology and surrounding countries and their chronologies and their historical narratives.
Obviously, I'm not in this field, but if I had to just speculate wildly, I would say that the part of the reason that is because there was this thing called the Bronze Age collapse. And you remember some vague stories and ideas and themes from, you know, people way back, but, you know, the details are fuzzy. But yeah, you're doing the best you can.
Yeah. Captain Reinid Rider says, Baramin means the species has created. Yeah, that's a reasonable translation of those words.
It's such bad
Hebrew.
Ugh.
Yeah, because Hebrew, well, I mean, biblical Hebrew is characteristically VSO, and there's nothing to indicate that mean is not anything other than the subject of that sentence. Like, if you had said, like, bara et mean, then the subject obviously would be something other than mean, because you use the direct object marker. But, like, no. It's very clear
that's the thing that the VSO thing, for those of you who aren't into linguistics, that's verb, subject, object. And like a really good example of that is the very first line of the print of the text of the Torah is like Bereshit bara Elohim et Shemayim. So when creating or when beginning to create, God, et meaning it's like a direct object connector, the heavens. It's like that's how that works. Verb, subject, object. And so it's in English. It's like when created, God. The heavens.
And look, I'm not exactly someone who knows a lot of Hebrew, but like this is like, have you ever picked up a Hebrew grammar in your entire life level of stuff?
No.
Yeah, no, the answer is obviously no. So.
Well, they got their Strong's Concordance. Wherever Dan McClellan is right now, he just like took psychic damage.
Look, the only reason I can see someone using Strong's Concordance here in the year of our Lord 2023 is
5783.
Well, it's to say, okay, where else in the text does this word occur? Because it's not terrible about that. And fine, if you want to know everywhere where that word occurs, Strong's Concordance is probably going to do it for you.
Yeah.
But like using it as a lexicon,
using
it as a lexicon is no. Don't use it as a lexicon. It's got extremely outdated. Yeah. And as for Greek, drink for Godzilla. As for Greek, I don't know what the current consensus is on the best lexicon. So, I can't help you.
And no, hello, my name is Fearmonger, Death Not a Tangelo. We cannot at least rename it to Minbarology to save me the psychic damage, because all of that is just nonsense.
Yeah, that still doesn't work. You have to find the passive participle form of bara. And I don't know what that is off the top of my head, but there is one, and you could just use that after the word mean, and then that would work. But you'd have to do it that way. You'd have to use the noun, then the passive participle form of bara. So...
Yeah, my brain is like, no, I refuse to do any of this.
Yeah, I'm not going to go find the actual translation just to help out the creationists. Because, for one thing, they won't appreciate it. For two, it's a lot of work. And for three, I'm just going to keep making fun of it either way. Anyway, here we go.
Yeah.
This chapter 6 now starts into the flood account. Due to time, I don't read most of the chapter like I used to. I'm going to summarize the chapter down to verse 17 and then read that. So in Genesis chapter 6, verse 3, it tells us that God told Noah that he wouldn't strive for man but for 120 years. So it's kind of like he's saying, you got 120 years to do this, Noah. The ark is being...
Not the only way to read that.
It's not the only way. I do think it's probably a reasonable way to read it. Like, if someone was like, that's my reading, I don't think I could say, you're definitely wrong. But
Because
yeah.
I tend to lean slightly to the school of thought that says that's putting a limit on how old humans would eventually become. But even then, that's not super consistent because, Noah continued to live for a bajillion more, decades.
True.
So even then, saying humans can't get older than 120 is not consistent. So
yeah, it's... Look, there's a number of ways you could read it. Not all of them are super internally consistent. But then again, like I said, Genesis isn't internally consistent already. It was not really intended to be, in my opinion.
It's poetry.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorite things from one of my Judaism classes is the teaching rabbi was like, look, Genesis is poetry, not prose, and you're going to have a lot less problems with it if you read it like poetry.
Yeah. My Unfinished Journey says to me, how do you feel about Zondervan's tools that use the Godric-Kohlenberger system instead of Strong's? I don't know that I have a good enough assessment of them that I could be reasonably relied on to tell you, but there is a Dr. Kip Davis here who probably would be better qualified to ask than me.
If I had to guess, I'm sure he's probably going to recommend either BDB or Hollowt, at least, but Hollowt's kind of advanced. I use it, but that's only because I've been studying the text for a while and I'm fine.
I use it via Vishanti. Anytime I need to look up a Hebrew word, I'm like, Vishanti, send me the Hollowt intro.
How is this word?
Yeah. And then one of my favorite things is to check the cognates, because that gives you a sense of the history of the word. So
yeah, I always highlight the cognates. I have a color coding system for how I mark up my copy of the Hollowt. For those of you who don't know, it's the Hebrew Aramaic lexicon of the Old Testament. So.
All right. Kip Davis points out the long ages in Genesis 5 are incredibly intricate reformulations of a solar calendric formula known from the 3rd century historian Berosus. Oh, that's cool.
They're both pretty advanced. And also, the Date Over Dogma podcast that Dan McClellan and Dan Beecher just did this past week talks about the long ages of the patriarchs, and it discusses the contemporary history of Sumerian kings lists, where they're just saying this king reigned for 40,000 years, and then this king reigned for 32,000 years, and it's riffing off the idea that there are these old historic figures who just had these insanely long lifetimes, and you're scaling them appropriately, and it's such cool contextual history. Highly recommend that. So,
or you could just go with, it's definitely literal, and leave it at that. And you can just
they actually lived to be 969 years, you guys.
You can just then ignore all the actual interesting historical textual stuff about it by just saying, it's totally real. It's just real, literally. Okay, sure. It's one of the things that bugs me about creationism is it's so much more boring than the actual facts on the ground. So
yeah, it's just the more history that I learn via a lot of the academics on Twitter, like Digital Hammurabi, Kip Davis, Dan McClellan, to an extent Mark Luchter, even though he's not super active, the more I get out of the text, because I have a lot more historical context and I understand where these ideas and polemics are coming from. So yeah, it's just, history is so cool, you guys.
No, instead you should read them strictly from the context of a 21st century Christian fundamentalist. That is definitely the right way to read all the texts.
Kip Davis is saying Sumerian Kings list, but specifically the version known through books.
Yes.
So much more boring, yeah. He agrees with you, Dapper.
Yeah, it is. It really is. Yeah. And it's also an incurious way to look at the text. Right.
And again, it would be like reading Jonathan Swift's, satire material without knowing why the heck he wrote it.
Yeah.
And who it's supposed to be riffing on. Come on, guys. Really?
Yeah,
why would you do it with this text?
Exactly. Oh, hey, look at this. A modest proposal for dealing with the Irish. Yeah. Definitely, this was a real thing that people advocated for. Yep. Okay, sure. You can think that.
nothing happens in a vacuum. It's goodness gracious.
Well, except for stuff that happens in space.
Hey!
Okay, here we go.
Built in Kentucky, everybody's kind of scoffing because they're using machinery, but I don't think we got 120 years to wait to show how you could really do it.
Yeah,
What do you do?
Okay, kind of, but I kind of agree with Pete here. I don't think the people who built the Ark Encounter used a crane is a good argument against
Right.
the
I'm
real
just saying,
existence of the Ark.
You do have 120 years. You just don't want to take that long.
Yeah, and I think that the people who donated to see the Ark built they want to see the Ark.
See it in their life.
So yeah, look, I'm not going to say a boat that big couldn't have been built. Like, it probably could have been if people wanted to. I don't think anyone did want to. I don't think it would have floated if they did. But and also oh, haha, the Ark Encounter used a crane. Like, yeah, okay, I just don't care.
Okay.
It's also when people are like, look, it had flood damage. It's like, yeah, but it was the driveway.
Well, the road, it was the driveway it washed out. That's not the same thing.
Yeah. It's it's amusing, but this is not a real criticism of the Ark Park that is a serious thing.
Yeah,
you can laugh
how
at
they
it,
built
but
it is the least important reason to hate that whole shebang.
Zerulon points out correctly.
Also, Zerulon, everything happens in space.
That's true. Yeah, one of my friends was like, I don't like space movies. And I'm like, well, what's your favorite movie? And she gives me the name of some movie, and I'm like, doesn't that take place on Earth? She's like, yeah. I'm like, hey, where do you think Earth is?
Earth in space?
Yeah, Earth is in space.
Right.
All right, here we go.
Not only that, but Noah and those guys in those days were very smart people. They even had iron workers and so forth. They could have definitely done this. So we don't have 120 years to build the Ark to show.
That's a whole lot of supposition based on very little evidence. It's like, oh, well, we know what the technology level was before the flood. Do you?
Lord Crocus Squirrel Gaming, shout out.
Oh, hey, what's up, Lord Crocus Squirrel Gaming? Hey, better late than never.
That's right. Also, it's just this lost ancient high technology crap,
I mean, look, that's a fun idea for a world building exercise, right? There's a reason that a lot of D&D settings have ancient super magical or technological civilizations that have now passed away. It's cool stuff. But if you want to say it's real, you're going to actually have to find evidence of that technology out in the physical world. If you want to say that people...
literally every single example that people like Ellie Marzulli, Brian Forrester, Bright Insight, Uncharted X, all of those people point to, it's no, you can exactly tell how they built this because the overcuts exist.
Mm-hmm. And in many
Scientists
cases...
Against Myths literally built their own Egyptian hand drill and showed you how you can drill through granite with copper. So,
plus, in many cases, especially in Egypt, the construction techniques are just portrayed on walls.
Yeah, they're portrayed on the walls in the freaking art. What?
This is a painting of people using a copper saw and sand to saw through a block of stone. That's probably how they did it.
Drill these perfectly circular holes. Well, with an Egyptian hand drill, you can. Look, they drew a picture of it. Yep. What are you doing?
Yep. It's they're telling you how they did it. We're doing practical archaeology experiments to show that this definitely works. They clearly had the technology. No. But the thing with this is
it would have taken too long. I'm like, what do you mean take too long? What did you think they had to go home and watch reruns of Frasier in the evening? What else were they doing? That's why I say Scientists Against Myths. It's I think it's a group of Russians. And one of them literally recreated their own Egyptian hand drill, and he is very proficient at just spinning it around and drilling this hole. Mm-hmm. And then one of his assistants gets up there to try to drill it, and the thing's wobbling, and he's dropping it. So it takes practice, but if you practiced enough, you could drill a hole several inches thick within a matter of minutes.
Well, that's why, contrary to what a lot of people will tell you, construction in Egypt, especially of large monumental architecture, was not primarily done by slaves. It was done by skilled craftsmen who were well compensated for their labor, because it was
they're highly more proficient.
Skilled. Yeah, you couldn't just pick up a few hundred highly skilled stoneworkers over at the local parking lot. It was a pretty big deal to be able to do this. So,
they're outside waiting at the Egyptian Home Depot in the morning, and
the day laborers are just out there. Although I do love that when Florida was like, "Oh, we're going to start cracking down on people who are undocumented workers being hired for day labor and stuff."
The greatest self-known in history.
Yeah, construction in Florida just ground to a halt. It's oops.
Yeah, construction stopped. They weren't harvesting the same amount.
Yeah, basically the entire state just ground to a halt. It's oops.
Ground to a halt. Love it.
And then people are like, what am I going to do? Pay some like American kid like $30 an hour because he's not going to do it for a rate that I can afford? Yeah, no, you're probably not going to. It's almost like cracking down on undocumented workers was not a good idea.
They're taking our jobs, but then the jobs that they took, you're not doing. So okay.
Yeah. They can only take your job if you were actually going to be doing that job in the first place. Oh, you weren't? Guess it doesn't count.
So that a wooden heart can be made. So every intent of the people's heart in those days was only evil continually.
I love that because, like, if you take that literally, it means like no one ever just like kind of got hungry and had an apple or something, right? It was like, I'm kind of hungry. What's the most evil way I can fix this problem? Like, you're telling me that before the flood, other than Noah and his family, like literally everyone was doing everything
Or at
intentionally
least
in the
just
most
Noah,
evil way.
because it really doesn't discuss that his family was righteous. It just says Noah was.
I mean, that's fair. I think it's a reasonable inference to say that his family was probably
I'm
okay-ish.
just saying.
But yeah, I guess so. I think it specifies Noah because he was the patriarchal head of that family.
Yeah.
And therefore...
Well, yes, I'm just...
Yeah, he represents the whole family. Yeah, anyway. But yeah, if you take the every the intent was continuously evil, like that can't actually work, right? Sometimes people just get like sleepy and they want to take a nap. How do you nap evilly?
How do you take an evil nap?
Right, what does that mean? What, do you like crush a puppy or something under you while you're napping? Is that what that means? Like, I don't know. How do you do that?
Hey,
right?
Hey, Dapper, does hyperbole exist?
No, it definitely never existed.
Oh,
Anyone
okay.
who says that hyperbole existed is obviously lying to you. But that's one
So when you read, it was only evil continually, it's like, it might be hyperbole. I'm just saying.
Yeah, maybe. Savage quotes from...
Oh, yeah, Jacques. Oh. Fibonacci 8. He nailed it. He says you have to raise a pinky to your lips. That's how you do it evilly.
Oh, okay, yes. Savage quotes from random note cards Cobra for $5 says, the pre-flood population were Power Rangers villains. Yes. It's just a world full of Power Rangers villains. Now what I'm thinking of is just Poisandra from Dino Charge, as like basically everyone just wandering around gleefully doing evil for no particular reason, but being really excited about it.
That reminds me of a comic solicitation cover that dropped this week. It's Dr. Doom writing a Doombot, but the Doombot is a dinosaur. It is the coolest thing I have ever seen in my life. Nice.
Heather Kuhn, who's been a member for 3 months, thank you very much, and is at the tetrapod level, says, you'd think Florida would have learned from Alabama. First, I don't think anyone's looking to Alabama.
Man, Alabama doesn't even learn from Alabama. What are you doing?
Poor Alabama. Shipfish, who's been a member for 17 months and is at the tetrapod level, says, dog noise! And a Godzilla. So we'll drink for the Godzilla. Yes, there was a dog noise. One of the dogs here, the big dog here, recently had some outpatient surgery type procedures done. And currently has a cone. And he does not like that.
The cone of shame.
Yeah, well, it's that or he starts licking the scar. So, But yeah, he also can't fit through the doggy door anymore. So...
Uh-oh.
He'll try and he'll just bump. He gets upset about it. It's sad. We let him out.
Aww.
We open the door for him.
A pupper.
Okay, here we go.
Well, we still got some people on the earth today that aren't that way. We may think of evil every once in a while. Like Pastor Joe says, we get cut off on the freeway. But we don't think of it continually. As a matter of fact, we're kind of looking out for what we can do good for people.
Yeah, I think that's just how people...
Are you, though?
Well, the thing is, he thinks he is, right?
Of course.
Because he genuinely believes these things, and he thinks that the things that you see him as doing that harm people, he genuinely, I'm assuming, thinks that this is helping people, right? Mm-hmm. So, he thinks, and I think that's generally how most people are. I think most people think of themselves as trying to help people generally. Sometimes they fail. Sometimes, they get annoyed. But except for people who have, like severe personality disorders, I think most people are trying to go through life being reasonably good people. And that's one of the reasons why I don't buy into the idea that you can reasonably take this aspect of Genesis literally. Because that's just not how humans work. Brockton Sorensen for $2 says, Vishanti, are you going to NDK Denver?
And I replied in the chat and I said, no, I'm going to DragonCon.
Okay.
Yeah.
In Georgia.
Yep.
It's one of the easiest
That's
places
how
to
I
get
can
to.
always one of the ways I can always tell, or anybody from the South can tell that you're not either natively Southern and that you've never been to Atlanta is the way that you say Atlanta. If you say Atlanta with the hard T, we're like, yeah, you're not from here.
Ah.
It's Atlanta. Atlanta. That's how it's spread. Atlanna. Atlanta. That's how you say it.
Atlanta. Okay.
Atlanta. Savage quotes from Random Note Cards. Cobra is saying the Georgia Aquarium is really cool. It is very cool. There's actually an aquarium night where they block off the Georgia Aquarium just for Dragon Con, and we all go in, and there's like a banquet, and you can take photos. And I went, I think, 2 years ago to Dragon Con Night's Aquarium, and I love it.
Nice.
They have such great exhibits. Like there's a little tunnel where you can walk underneath the water and you see all the fish and stuff's like swimming above you and the sharks and everything. It's so cool.
I love those. Those are really cool.
Yeah, it's very neat.
All right, we're going to get a little bit more Pete in, and then we're going to wrap things up here.
And so we're not to that extent yet, but God had to judge the earth because of this. God planned.
Yeah, there's no sense in which this is actually a polemic against the myths of surrounding areas in which basically the gods just kind of got cranky because humans were making noise and keeping them up at night. And then
Right.
the people who are compiling this are like, no. See what actually happened. The reason there was a flood, because remember, there's this pervasive cultural myth throughout all of these cultures about a flood. And then a correction, quote unquote, is made as a polemic in favor of the God of Israel and against the other gods, saying that, no, see, the real reason that the flood happened is first, our God did it. Second, he had good reasons, unlike just being like, humans are too noisy. Yeah, no, not that. Yeah, our God is the real righteous God.
Like, I'm gonna shill Digital Hammurabi again, who, by the way, again, just put out the, Does the Bible Support Slavery 2nd edition, which I helped edit a little bit. So, he discusses how it is a polemic in specific response to those, contemporaneous legends. And it's so brilliant because if you read the Enuma Elish and all the, the other epics, the way that it obliquely will reference them or counterpoint them, it's so clever. People are like, big brain atheist bros on the internet, hashtag TM, are like, oh, they just stole it. I'm like, God, you're ignorant. You don't have to be.
Yeah, the idea of stealing in this context doesn't even make sense.
So dumb.
Okay, so we are going to start wrapping things up, though, here. So, Vishanti, do you have anything coming up that you want to tell people about?
Actually, yeah. I'm going to be recording a lot of things tonight. One of them is for Fossil Daddy, so we're going to have a collaboration coming out very soon. And I'm also doing some voice recordings for some other people, and I will let them disclose that at their own pace. But I also have a wish list linked if you guys want to help contribute to me and my work.
I actually do have to link it
just,
afterwards.
my scholarship.
I have to link it afterwards. So
when this video is rewatchable, it will be in the description.
Yeah. Because I wasn't sure if Vishanti was going to be here today, so I actually, I only was sure, and then I added a link to her channel. If you want to go check out her wish list right now, it is linked in her channel, so you can just check it through that link. But I'm going to be putting a specific link to the wish list under that.
Yes.
After the video after we close up shop here.
And if anybody is going to Dragon Con, just, message me and we'll see if we can find a time to meet up and maybe go to some of the science track stuff because they have solar telescopes, which are super cool. And, all I got so far.
All right. Well, let's take a look at the calendar and see if I can talk about what's coming up in the next week or so. Okay, so on Tuesday, Matt with Maddie. I don't have a title for it yet, but that's okay. I believe we're still doing a raw Matt interview, which is I don't even know how to describe it. It's just it's like brain meltingly dumb. Raw Matt is possibly one of the, and when I say this, I mean like he makes choices to be one of the stupidest people imaginable. I'm not saying that I think he has some kind of disability that causes him to make silly statements. I think he has made intentional choices that has led him to the point where he says things like, you should only ever eat one fruit that's in season per month, ever. Or, hey, let me go make some was it whatever? It was nut cheese, like it was pecan cheese or something like that. Like, what is that? No, I don't even know what that is. Or he's claimed to be the inventor of the kale chip.
Okay.
Yeah. Or like that there's air in space. Oh no, that was the other Matt. I guess technically you haven't heard him say that. Anyway.
There's too many dumb Matts.
Yeah, it's like Young Earth Creationist Matt is like Flat Earth Nathan's. Like,
oh my gosh, it is.
yeah.
It is.
Matt is just the Nathan of Young Earth Creationism. Did your mind just get blown a little bit by that parallel?
Yes. Incredible.
Sorry to ruin your weekend with that.
Jeez.
So that's going to be on Tuesday. Then on Thursday, I am releasing the first part of a it's not David Menton. Who is it? It's someone that I know. Let's see, Grady McMurtry. So now, Grady McMurtry, he somewhat famously debated R and Raw, I believe, over on Modern Day Debate, and that was before they became, the bar where the National Socialist German Workers' Party hangs out. So I don't know that I can recommend going and watching it. Maybe download it and watch it so that you don't give your view time to the channel that sometimes has a National Socialist work.
Right? Anywhere, find a place where it's mirrored.
Yeah. So by the way, in case you're wondering, that is the reason I have not appeared on Modern Day Debate in such a long time. It is because, in fact, if I don't want to go into the bar that sometimes has the the skinheads show up. Not my thing. Not my scene.
No thanks.
Yep.
Nope.
And I'm like, oh, but they won't show up when you're there. I don't know that. They could be. They're in the chat sometimes. I just don't want to deal with it.
Yep.
Anyway, so if you're not familiar with him, he's a guy in Texas. Now, from that debate, one of my takeaways was that he was a member of a state board of education in Texas, and that he encouraged basically miseducation about science as a result of his creationism. I have not been able to find any independent confirmation of that outside of the debate, so I'm not sure about that. But anyway, yeah, that's the first part of that series is coming out on Thursday. That'll be at noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern. On Saturday, the 2nd, that's next month, 2023, in case you're watching this in the future. I'm going to be doing a episode of Leaving Young Earth Creationism with Dr. Zach B. Hancock, who is an evolutionary biologist who specializes in a group of crustaceans. That's where his research is. And he recently hit 1,000 subscribers on his channel. He had a 1,000 subscriber special. And he talked a bit about his intellectual journey from Young Earth Creationism out. So we're going to have a little bit more in-depth discussion here on this channel on the 2nd. That will be at same time. So noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern. And then I also want to say that currently around that time, I am planning to talk to Dr. Kip Davis, who's been in the chat, who is a scholar of Hebrew and early Jewish thought and literature about
Dead Sea Scrolls.
And Dead Sea Scrolls specifically, yeah. And we're going to talk about how reasonable it is to identify the behemoth of Job 40 as a dinosaur. What is actually meant is behemoth? What is the cultural context around behemoth? What are the actual plausible options? Why could or couldn't it be a sauropod? So if you're looking forward to that, I mean, I'm looking forward to that. That'll be on the 16th.
I'm looking forward to that.
And yeah, I've actually, Vishanti, you are in fact slated to be there with us for that. So,
woohoo!
Yeah, that'll be the three of us. We were not going to be responding directly to a particular creationist video or anything. We're just going to be taking a look at the text, taking a look at its cultural context, its linguistic context, all that stuff. So
it's definitely not behemoth, like Ken Hovind says it.
Yeah.
Behemoth.
So yeah, that's a little bit beyond a week from now, but I wanted to say that was a thing that I am looking forward to. I think that's going to be a great time. Anyway, if you are a channel member or a patron, you have access to the Discord server. If you head over there, we're going to start watching the last 2 episodes of Power Rangers in Space and the first 2 episodes of Power Rangers Lost Galaxy. How they lost that galaxy, I have no idea. All right, everybody. Okay. I'll talk to you all, or see you all, hopefully, on Tuesday. Hey, before you leave, I just want to take a second to thank my patrons and channel members, especially those pledging $20 or above. Ben Tovind, Tapioca Weasel, Whispers, Elron Teller, Phil Havara, Ian Chen, Kelvin Brostick Van Manen, Landon Knoll, Mabbity Babbity, Monkey They Them, Mrs. Speckcinder, Sphincter of Doom, and the Venerable Bede. It's because of my channel members and patrons whom you're seeing on screen that this channel can stay afloat. Without you, it would all shut down. If you want to join the team, there's a link to join the channel below this video, and there's a link to join the Patreon in the description. On the Patreon, you can get a 10% discount for pledging annually, and either way, you get early access to virtually all of my scripted videos, often 3 to 5 months before they come out for the general public. Thanks for watching.